are nowhere to be seen. So when the history of the new movement was first written, it was the winners who did it. 100 years ago, the Vatican set up a special institute to guard the Bible against false interpretation. One of its professors, Father Dean Burchard, agreed to meet me. Why is James so marginalised in church history? I mean, we see no pictures or statues of him in Rome.
Yeah, that's true. And unfortunately, most of the history of that Jerusalem church is lost. If it were not for Luke, with a few recording the few little things that he learned, we'd know next to nothing at all. You know, and so most of that history is lost, and it's tragic.
So you don't believe Luke was trying to write James out of the story and promote Paul over James?
Well, it's true, and that's an issue in the study of the Acts of the Apostles, you know, that it's a selective history, you know, it's just a few pieces of that puzzle Luke chose to include. And as a historian, I try to be as objective as possible and try to do a critical understanding and reading, interpretation of the evidence that's there. But I don't begin with a basic suspicion against the tradition. I begin, as a Jesuit, with the basic assumption that the tradition of the Church is trustworthy.
Surely the family of Jesus is just an embarrassment to the Church. They just don't fit the story.
Christians, I think, in every generation have had interest and curiosity about that. But that curiosity has generated fanciful, speculative, imaginary images and stories about the family of Jesus. And I would suggest that this whole reconstruction of James in the early church is another example of that.
I am convinced that James ran the New Jesus movement for 30 years until his death, and that the Jesus family's control of the church in Jerusalem lasted for another 50 years until they finally disappeared from the historical record. Peter and Paul had won.
I think the tragedy, really, of Jewish Christianity was that it got disowned by both sides. It got disowned by the mainstream Christian movement, which was increasingly Gentile. It got disowned by rabbinic Judaism. Eventually, in the 4th century, Jerome says the trouble with the Jewish Christians is they want to be both Jews and Christians, as a result of which they are neither. For the Jewish Christians themselves, it was obvious that they could be both, but nobody else allowed them to be both, and they got left out.
In the Church of St. Paul's, outside the walls of Rome, built on the site of Paul's tomb, there are portraits of every pope from the very beginning of the Church, right through to the present day, with one key absentee: James. Even though he was the first Christian bishop. The church also has one of the biggest murals in Rome. It depicts Jesus flanked by Peter and Paul, but also includes Luke, the man who wrote a large part of the New Testament and the person who did the most to write the Jesus family out of the story.
The importance of the family of Jesus, I think, really was that they were the key leaders within Jewish Christianity. And it's no exaggeration to say that James was as important as Peter and Paul. And if more of the legacy of James had survived, then perhaps the church would not have become so shockingly anti-Jewish.
There is a small village in Syria where the people still speak Aramaic, the language spoken 2,000 years ago by Jesus and his family.
يتكتش اسمك استير ملكوتك يتكنتش بعيلي أخمد بشمو خيط على رعا أبليح لحمح إمود يعينح يومح.
Every year, the villagers commemorate their ancient Christian heritage by celebrating the finding of the cross in Jerusalem on which Jesus was crucified.
حيث ليخ ملكة وحيلة وشبحة هوش والعلم العلمة آمين.
It's also a date that marks the Church's final victory over Jesus' blood family. I believe that Jesus had a mother, father, 4 brothers, at least 2 sisters, aunts, uncles, nephews and nieces. One of his relatives, John the Baptist, was his spiritual teacher and helped start his mission. After Jesus' death, his eldest brother James took over control of the church and ran it for another 30 years. Ever since, the Roman Catholic and Orthodox churches have not only hidden the true story, they've also suppressed their version of Christianity, the original message handed down by Jesus himself, because it was too dangerous. But amazingly, if you know where to look, you can still find it in the Bible itself.
You know, even though James and the family have been written out of history and marginalized within the New Testament, it's not wholly lost. And you know, the nice thing about it, it's on the pulpit of every church in the world. It's right there in the New Testament. You open it up, you gotta dig, you gotta find it. But the shades and shadows of the brothers, of the family, of its importance and what it means is still there. We can recover it.
Hidden away at the back of every Bible are 2 remarkable letters that some historians believe are written by the followers of Jesus' brothers James and Jude. Today's version of Christianity, as handed down from Paul, proclaims salvation through faith in Jesus Christ as the Son of God. The brothers' version is totally different. Theirs concentrates on what Jesus taught and his blueprint for changing the world, and a lot of it is revolutionary stuff. The Syriac Orthodox, one of the oldest established churches in the world, uses a form of worship it claims was written by Jesus' brother James. But I believe it and the rest of the Christian world has lost touch with Jesus' original message.
Some people believe the book of James is actually a dangerous book because he warns the rich and the powerful that they face judgment from God. Is that spirit still one that your church believes in?
Well, we as a church, don't interfere in politics.
You don't interfere in politics?
As a church.
As a church?
But we advise and encourage our faithful as individuals to be involved in all the political matters. They are free to do so. But as a church, it is dangerous if the church will adopt any idea, political idea. Yes.
The first station. Here, Jesus.
The letters of Jesus' brothers were so dangerous that for hundreds of years, the church fathers refused to include them in the Bible. They were only finally accepted because the oral traditions concerning Jesus' family were so strong.
There were some Christian leaders who said, well, James, I don't know if we should include him. Now, he's the brother of Jesus. Why wouldn't you want his letter? Because if you read the letter, it doesn't have the gospel that people came to associate with Christianity.
In complete contrast to today's Christianity, the letters of Jesus'